Welcome to Brain Balance Live. We come together every Monday to chat with Heather Wells, the lovely and talented. She has so many gifts, and she just gifts us with information each week. And we're so grateful to you, Heather. How are you?
I'm doing well. I understand y'all need some of our rain.
We do. I'm Jen, busy mom of 3, and I am in Florida, and we are in a just absolutely dry state right now. And Heather is trying just to will the rain to us because we hear that you in Texas are just getting rained and rained on. Is that right?
Yes, I was building an ark up until a couple minutes ago. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, we are so excited to be here each week and chat about different things that can help us navigate situations with our neurodiverse children and even ourselves as some of us neurodiverse adults. Today, we're going to be talking about the big picture. What are we going to be tackling today, Heather?
This is one of the number one issues that I hear about from families is, my child doesn't see the big picture. They may have excellent memory for details. They correct details of arguments. You're trying to teach sportsmanship and they want to say, no, his shirt wasn't orange, it was yellow, which wasn't the point, that kind of thing. But I want to say that, the big picture is much more than getting the main idea of a story. That's definitely part of it, or getting the gist of your parental wisdom that you're imparting. It is also the ability to see how the details go into a larger concept of understanding. It is knowing how to tackle a paper and what is this topic supposed to be about? Then where do the details go so that I achieve that big topic? It's goal setting and what it takes, the smaller parts that go into the larger goal. It is social skills, because I need to take myself out of telescopic view of my opinion, my point of view, and open up to, could it be that someone else has something valuable to say? Collaboration, communication. This impacts every part of our lives in ways that are obvious when you hear big picture and in ways that may not be until after today.
Okay, so what kinds of things are we going to be talking about? Because Heather gets us from the therapy aspect. She is a board certified cognitive specialist. She knows she's the National Autism Summit speaker, so she has lots of experience with kids with autism and ADHD. So how are we going to go about talking about this subject today, Heather?
I think we're going to roll into the first slide, and it is just a really good depiction of this. Look at all of these individuals with their view on a very specific part of an elephant. And if I only look at it from one standpoint, the ear, it's a fan. And they see the tusk, it's a spear, it's a snake, the trunk, it's a tree when they see the leg, it's a wall, big old side of that elephant, it's a rope for the tail. And all of them might be absolutely convinced they are right. If you ever, I'm right, you're wrong with your kids, and wow, they're lacking the cognitive flexibility to take in more information, they really are convicted that they are right, because all they see is the tail. All they see is the ear of whatever topic it is you're talking about. And even when they stand back, this one on the side is saying it's a giant animal. That's the big picture, but that shows us that the details are also important, because without the details, I don't know which large animal it is. So the two of these concepts work very, very closely together. They are both important, but they must be balanced. And that is what so many kids are missing. They might get the big picture, and for the life of them, what were the details that went in with that? I don't remember. Or the flip side, but they must work together. So,
okay. Do kids usually have like one or the other problem?
Most of the time. Some kids do have some issues with both, but in general, most individuals have more issues with one or the other. Kids with autism, ADHD, often have difficulty with the big picture, whereas students with dyslexia and certain types of learning disabilities may have more issue with the details. And they understand what they read better by giving them the big picture first, because now you're speaking to their strength. And now it's easier for them to start learning the details that go into the big picture, because that resonates with them. But most of the time, our students do have a strength in one or the other of these areas, but they're not working well as a team. And it can make it look like they have issues in both. But if I don't get the big picture, I have more trouble remembering the details. because I don't get why and how they go together. If I have the details and don't have a place to put them, it's just a pinball machine in my head of information. What do I do with it?
Yes.
So one sign that you could have that kids have difficulties with the big picture that we haven't mentioned is if they say, why does this matter? Why do I need to know this? Some kids will say that because they care about the big picture and they're asking you to supply it for them. Some kids don't have the big picture. And so they think that this is pointless, it's boring, it's dumb, it's stupid, it's a waste of time. So, and if we say, because it will prepare you for next year, for example, on an academic subject, that is about the same thing as saying it's important because I said so. I mean, that is not getting there. Remember, when kids ask questions, we want to answer them because they are seeking understanding of the world. And so if we give just very vague answers, we're not really helping them connect the dots. And it's important to do that. And understand that some individuals do not understand that concepts are more than the sum of their parts. That is Gestalt. That is part of big picture. So you can give me any one part of an elephant, I still don't have an elephant.
Yeah.
Right. And so many kids rely on such good memory and just tell me what to learn and I'm going to memorize it for the test. But they don't get that then means I don't get how it translates into a word problem. Yeah, maybe they know how to do every single part of the calculation that needs to happen, but concepts are more than the sum of their parts. They're good readers. They're good at math calculation. Why can't they do word problems? They don't get the big picture. When I get the big picture, I know what is relevant and irrelevant in a situation. So as we move on to the next slide, we've talked about how both types of learning or of thinking are important. We want to do both. So convergent thinking is very logical. If you have kids who are logical, structured, analytical, I know what I want, when I want, how I want it. They may have a rule-based system, even if they want it to be their own rules. But fact. They can spout off all kinds of baseball stats. They can spout off I before E, except after see all these phonics and spelling rules. And fact. They come up with an answer. That is very literal, logical, concrete. These skills are very, very valuable. There are a lot of careers in the future that are not going to reward this type of strength as much. We need both. Divergent thinking has a lot of imagination, abstract thinking. It's about ideas instead of absolute facts. So there's a lot of creativity, innovation. Innovation is more than creativity because there's an element of originality there. And by the way, a lot of our kids are so creative, and because schools have not really caught up to the wave of a lot of them, not all of them, but the wave of the 21st century and what jobs are going to look like is different. And how do we honor the strengths of neurodivergent kids? They might be trying to do an assignment in a way that their brain works, and then they get in trouble for not following the assignment. Of course, we have to do what the assignment says, but look at those things, and are they revealing to you strengths that aren't being honored in a grading system, but that are super worthwhile? With divergent thinking, it's about so much flexibility. There are many ways to interpret the same question. And that also means there are going to be multiple answers. And I don't have all the answers. And so I'm going to collaborate and we can pick brains. And there's so many like team leadership types of organizations now where it's all, think tanks and group projects and things like that. It's all about possibilities, not just what is, but what can be. It's not linear. For example, if you think about history class, we shouldn't be teaching about all these different wars as separate events, because all of the events around the world then impact other events in the future. Bad feelings from this war then led to this. What was going on in this other country when that happened? We need to be connecting dots and not just be teaching this war happened then, separate and apart, then this war. If we are teaching them as separate pieces of information, we're doing the very opposite of how the world works. But it is all about connecting it to what they've learned in the past, connecting it to a hobby, connecting it to their personal story, connecting it to something they care about, connecting it to community. How many ways can we connect information? The more we connect information to multiple things in these kids' lives, the more relevant it is, the more engaged they are, and the more meaningful it's going to be. It is not about we need to teach our kids how to think, not what to think. And I've already said this is important for every single aspect of life, not just academic and career, but also social. But so much, you can see how much flexibility is there, but these kids are going to be expected to think outside the box in their careers. And the good news is that some of the very skills that are not rewarded in schools are the things that are going to be rewarded when they're young adults out in the workforce. So
you know what it reminds me of when you talk about this is that you remember that scene from Big where Tom Hanks is trying out the toys and he's just different than any of the other adults because he's technically still a kid. And I always think about that scenario and I think how great would it be if as we became adults, if we didn't get all of those things kind of taken out of our nature, you know, and they kind of that's what this reminds me of is like keeping those things actually that make them really, really great thinkers, even though it's not exactly streamlined the way like adults maybe always think it should be.
Right. I mean, there is a way if we can honor these divergent thinkers, and all of us need to grow divergent skills, whether we are inherently divergent thinkers or not. A balance of these, it's okay to have one that's a little stronger than the other. What causes problems is when the strengths and the weaknesses are so far off from one another that there's a lack of communication in the brain. But if I am just my head's in the clouds and nothing I'm saying is based in fact and based in a system that with parameters, that can be a problem. So we need that convergent thinking too, but reward divergent and bring it out in them. This summer, there are so many opportunities to do that. But we're going to talk about what metacognition means on the next slide, because that's also very central to seeing the big picture. Look on the left here. You've heard me say so many times that we learn first in our sensory motor system, and it translates into cognitive development. Metacognition very simply means to think about my thinking. It's very much about self-awareness and monitoring and reflection and that kind of thing. But if kids have sensory motor issues and they're missing some of the visual details, they get overwhelmed with auditory, so they miss some of the auditory information. On and on it goes. Their background knowledge that they can bring into what they're working on is going to be decreased. It just is. Kids may remember information presented verbally or visually, one or the other better than the other, because that is part of processing. They can have excellent memories in some ways and not so great in others. Abstract thought, reading between the lines, picking up on nuances, thinking about situational factors. There's a lot, if you think about one of the wisest people you know, what makes them wise? It's not how many facts they know, although that's valuable. It is that they can attune to what you're saying, pick up on all the nuances of what you're sharing, think about all the situational, the circumstantial factors weighing into this and balancing it all out, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we need. We need reasoning skills, all kinds of, of course, attention, flexibility. Everything's not black and white. This is all about shades and degrees. How many times have I talked about working memory? Working memory is problem-solving memory. It is basically short-term and long-term memory working as a team. It's categorized under short-term memory. I'm facing a challenge. I pull information from my file cabinet in my brain, background knowledge from long-term storage, use it, manipulate it, go store it back. Any part of memory, any part of big picture details can get in the way of that. Sometimes kids have awesome ideas. Are we giving them time to get them out? Yeah, there's a thing called slow cognitive tempo that looks very similar to ADHD inattentive type. And really, the ideas are there. It's just slower. We also have kids who might be slower just with visual perception and processing, just with auditory. So are we delivering information in the way that they can best understand it? And are we giving them a chance to answer? Are we jumping in and providing an answer because we don't want to see them struggle? But part of this metacognition is, and you've heard me say this on several shows, anytime we're doing something, whether it is a social situation, reading, any kind of career thing, what do I already know about this topic? I'm thinking about my thinking. I am breeding familiarity. I am pulling in my background knowledge. That helps me connect dots and create schemas. Oh, this is what I'm working on. Oh, yes, this is very relevant. I'm going to pull that in. In fact, what researchers say is the difference between an expert and a novice is that experts connect the dots on the new pieces of information. Whereas with a novice, it's a kind of an item unto itself. Schemas are all about categories of understanding. Do I have the self-awareness to think about my thinking? And fix-up strategies are, hey, for example, reading. I didn't understand what I just read. I need to go back, slow down, think through it. Why didn't I understand it? Is it because there are vocabulary words I don't know? Is it because I wasn't paying attention? Is it because I'm stumbling through sounding out words? That requires metacognition. And I need to go back and fix it and not just keep motoring through. Kids with impulsivity have a hard time hitting the brake pedal. What are some resources I can reach out to? Making connections, connecting dots. Big picture skills are the glue that tie all of those important details together. And then big picture lets me know which ones are relevant and irrelevant to face the task at hand. Can I visualize what's going on? Sometimes kids with visual perception issues have difficulty with that. When I first finally got sight and I was learning to read, I wasn't picturing stories as I was reading them because I didn't know what things looked like. But that visualization is very tied to creativity and innovation. When we read, our comprehension is expanded by picturing the story. And it's cool that not all of us could read the same story and we don't get the same visual when we read it because we're pulling in background knowledge. We're making it relevant to our lives.
Yep.
And what questions do I ask? Sometimes think about self-advocacy skills. If your kids have a breakdown of, I don't know when my assignment is due, I don't know how to study for this test, somebody was picking on me, do they know how to self-advocate or what to say or which questions to ask? If you ask, if you're working with them on homework, which part has you stuck? Can they answer that question with specificity? If not, even though that seems like a detailed answer, they have to know the totality of the task at hand to be able to pinpoint which thing it is they're struggling with. So many things that look like detail abilities are very tied to big picture issues. Can they infer information? If you say something to them, can they figure out what you mean, even if you didn't literally say exactly what you meant? Like, we're going to eat at 6 o'clock. Can they infer that you're giving me a general guideline and you don't mean it will say 6:00 on the clock? When they're reading a story and they're answering comprehension questions, which ones trip them up? Is it the ones that the answers are in black and white, or is it the ones where they're supposed to read between the lines and answer the questions? That's inferencing.
That's very tricky. That's so hard for my little guy.
And that it usually is with individuals with big picture struggles.
Yeah.
And most kids that I've worked with over these decades who have difficulty with inferencing also have difficulty with prediction skills. What's going to happen next? And that leads to anxiety. If they can't predict what's going to happen next in a story, if they do much better, routines and schedules are very good. But if there is a meltdown when something doesn't go as planned, that is, I am unable to predict my world. The certainty of having a rigid schedule helps keep me regulated. And when that doesn't happen, forget about it. It's not fun for anybody in the house in those moments.
Yep.
That tells you something. Think about inferencing and predictive abilities. So important. When I'm working on a project at school, I have to predict, if I tackled it this way, these are some roadblocks I might face, and how can I do a workaround? We do the same thing in our jobs. So this is a super critical life skill. Determining the importance. If they are going to, okay, I've got this project, and let me just map out, okay, this is a project that's due in 6 weeks. What are the components that go into it? And now organize them into Roman numerals. Those are the big tasks. And then the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. Think about an outline. The details that go into reaching Roman numeral number 1. The details that help me achieve Roman numeral number 2. Most kids with big picture struggles think that all the components are the Roman numerals. They cannot differentiate, prioritizing. This is the big bullet point, and these are the sub bullet points underneath. Therefore, it's overwhelming. They opt out, task avoidance, they get called lazy, unmotivated, when really it's overwhelming because everything's the big deal.
Yep.
There's a lot of times you see this with perfectionism as well. Look for another explanation other than laziness, because kids are not born lazy. They're not.
Yeah.
And synthesizing. Give kids so much practice in not saying, tell me what I just said. Were you listening? Tell me what I just said. Tell them in your own words, tell me what you understood I asked you to do. When they read something, don't just have them answer the comprehension questions, have them summarize it in their own words. That is comprehension. That is, in this digital age, that can make detail-oriented individuals' brains explode and be overwhelming for those who don't have a big picture. How do I narrow down? I did a search for this and it came up with 1.3 million hits. How do I know which one of these pieces of information which ones of these I'm going to use as my resources? How important is this in this information age? So, and then reflecting after the fact, part of metacognition is not just helping me as I go through it, but beforehand, I'm asking, what do I know about this topic? During, do I need to have any fix-up strategies? Have I dropped any balls? Is there something I'm not understanding? And afterwards, reflecting back, learning from it so that you learned what worked and what didn't, so you can take that forward next time. Using your metacognition, background knowledge, you pull in this experience to make it better next time. All of these are big picture.
Do you find that some of these things come from insecurities ever? Sometimes I feel like he's rushing through or just getting things done, or very focused on the way he wants to do it, and doesn't want to listen to me very much or whatever. And sometimes I feel like it comes out of his own insecurities that maybe he doesn't have all of these skills, and so he just wants to move on and pretend it doesn't exist.
Right. Usually the insecurity comes from the fact that they struggle with big picture skills. So, and because they don't have those, they feel insecure. And we've talked about rejection sensitivity and low self-esteem so many times. And so if I think I'm a human doing, not a human being, I need to perform this way or else. And it's not because of what parents are telling their kids. It is because they don't feel worthy as a human being. They have these struggles. A lot of times they'll say they don't have homework, or they'll rush through it because I'm trying to really hide the struggle because I feel shamed by it. Not from the parents, internally.
Yeah.
And so many times what looks like they just don't care is they care so much about how they're perceived that they're using these strategies that are maladaptive. And what if they do let you know they need help and they still struggle and they didn't understand what you said? And now one thing I had going for me is I'm so smart, because your little one knows he's smart in a lot of ways, but maybe that means I have to be smart in all the ways or else I'm not smart anymore. All or nothing thinking. Mm-hmm. Right back to not having big picture. Big picture would be, we all have strengths and struggles. I am smart in all of these ways, and I'm just not quite there yet on this skill. Even growth mindset. And I'm just not quite there yet. And having perspective on your own abilities, strengths and struggles is a big picture skill also.
All right. We're going to keep working on it then. Yeah. We're going to break down the walls, aren't we?
Yes, ma'am. All right, let's move on. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just to point out, I mentioned very briefly that the jobs of the future, the careers of the future, are going to look vastly different from what they look like right now. You've already been seeing this big shift. I mean, this is Shark Tank age, but seriously, the job market is completely different. In the 1950s, there's a lot of, factory work. There's nothing wrong with any of these. It's just that the digital age that we live in, so many jobs are being replaced by machines. Like it or not, it's the truth. And certain types of progress sometimes don't feel like progress to me, but I'm a little bit old school in certain ways. Some of it's exciting.
Yeah.
But, think about, a lot of times schools are kind of geared to, teach to the test, and here are the core standards. And, in Texas, our kids have been finishing up, the task test and everything, but consuming information, compliance, sequential, you learn this, then this, then this. Whereas what is needed for going forward is creativity, challenging perceived norms. How else can we teach this? What kind of project-based learning can we do? And et cetera, and understanding and even connecting one subject to the other in school, not only connecting this history story with this history story, but how can you pull in science and math and make it all tell a story. It's got to be a bigger focus on their bigger picture in the world. Well, how are they going to be informed citizens? How are they going to be empathetic, listening to others' point of view in their personal lives and on these collaborative teams? They need, look at all these C's: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, creative thinking, character, citizenship. But so many of the students who are struggling right now are not going to be looking for jobs. They're going to be creating jobs. I mean, they're beautiful neurodiverse minds. We need to support them and help them through their struggles, because anytime they're compensating and they don't have to, we are taking away quality of life for them. However, we also need to celebrate their strengths at the same time. They are not mutually exclusive. So purpose, meaningful, thinking about all of the social emotional skills they need. That the emotional quotient is super important in these future jobs too. And they also require big picture thinking. Okay, let's move on. And just as this is sort of on a similar vein, but really breaking down the type learning agility, that, the flex and flow of the learning that they need. They need communication. How are they going to interact? They may have excellent language skills, like they have huge vocabularies, but do they have a filter? Do they know it's okay for me to say this in this context and not in this context? And it matters how you say it. And you got to pick up on their body language and how it's being received. Interacting, where it's not a one-sided conversation. Is it a give and take? Is there reciprocity? Collaboration, respecting other people's points of view. Do they know how to convey theirs without saying mine's right and yours wrong? Do they self-management, aside from the parts of self-management we already addressed, there's also the organization and time management. All of those involve big picture, because I have to know when it's due and where I need to be along the path. What are my tent poles for this, so that I'm not out of time at the last minute and way behind. We've talked about collaboration, information literacy, media literacy. How do they know that these sources are worthwhile, that are credible? Information age, they must be intelligent consumers of information. And how can they transfer their knowledge from one context to another? Part of the big picture is generalizing information I learned in this setting to another setting. A lot of kids, let's just even back it down to a child with autism, for example, who is going to learning the rules of engagement. Sometimes they will engage in things where we're going to teach you social rules. And these are the class, here's what you do in this situation. Here's what you do in this situation. And I have families come to me all the time and say, it seemed to help a little bit at first, and then I don't know what happened, but it's just kind of plateaued. It didn't go that far. That's because a lot of these kids who are struggling with the big picture and social pragmatic language, I can spout off rules all day long. I can memorize that script, but do I have the social emotional quotient, the biggest driver of doing the right thing? And it's not character, it's not their personality, it's neurodevelopment, is in the moment, picking up on those cues, having the brake pedal, and caring so much about how my actions impact you that it directs my behavior. So we really have to think about what their struggles are and make sure we're addressing the root causes of those struggles, and not teaching them rules when they already understand rules. They simply can't follow them because they're impulsive, because we need to grow their social emotional skills. And so we need to increase their theory of mind, the ability to appreciate the perspective of someone else, that kind of thing. Okay.
I feel like this goes both ways, doesn't it? I have to realize that he can't just memorize the way that I want him to be in order for me to fully get him as a human. I have to really understand him well to get to know him better, because if I'm constantly saying, are you mad at me? Are you mad at me? Are you mad at me? Like he's like, no, I just sound like this.
And I know you're talking from a parenting standpoint, but that reminds me of a quote from John Holt. He said, learning is not the product of teaching. Learning is the product of the activity of learners. And so we need to be less adult directed. Yes, we give guidelines. Yes, we train and raise our kids correctly, but we must let them practice their learning and problem solving muscle all along the way so they are ready. That can lead to a lot of resentment on their part, where on the parent side, we don't want you to see you suffer. We're trying to raise you. We're trying to get this right. It's such a balancing act, and it's hard because we don't want to see them struggle.
Yeah.
But we don't want to set them up for bigger struggles later because we kept being their critical thinker for them.
Yes.
We kept being their compass for them. We train them correctly, and then we give them opportunities to practice.
Right.
When the stakes aren't quite as high as they're going to be down the road.
Sure.
And so one of the best ways to grow, look how clever this is, in my opinion. One of the best ways to work on big picture skills is to create mind maps. That's what this is. So I created a mind map of how to improve big picture skills. You follow me?
Yes, I love it.
So mind maps are something you can use if they have a project, a paper due. You can use this for work. This is fantastic in a career. This is the assignment, and you can have all these offshoots of what are my resources? Who are my team members? What are my time constraints? What do I already know about the topic? You can do these sprouts of whatever you need them to be. But I did a mind map of big picture because mind maps are one of the best things you can do for big picture. So tip 1, mind maps. But
circle.
Yes. But here are 4 questions to teach kids to ask themselves. We want to get our kids learning to ask themselves questions if they struggle with the big picture. So let's say they're facing an assignment. They need to say, why am I doing this? And we're not looking for answers like to waste my time until it's time for baseball practice. That's not the kind of answer we want. Points for honesty if that's how they feel. But that's really a sign they don't get the big picture. But it can be, because I want to be a CPA and this is growing my math skills. Or my goal is to buy my own car. So I'm looking for ways to this will help me raise money to buy my car. The why matters. How many times y'all heard me say, get their buy-in, get their engagement, but it also gives the big picture. The why is the big picture for a task. What is my task? That may sound silly, but keep in mind that things that seem so obvious to neurotypical individuals are not necessarily obvious for our kiddos who have big picture issues. And so sometimes, let's say that they're supposed to use their spelling words in sentences. They might just say, I'm supposed to write some stuff. I'm supposed to write sentences. They might be missing stuff in there. So that really helps. Or sometimes kids will get sidetracked from writing sentences with their spelling words because they got all these cool gel sparkly pens that make the assignment look so pretty. And then they get distracted from really what they need to be focusing on. How will I know I'm on track? This is a very metacognitive question. And know that most of the time schools will give you rubrics that help you know that they're staying on track. Like student can retell a story in their own words to demonstrate comprehension. That would be one way you know you're on track. But there's also, how do you know you're on track timeline-wise? How are they going to track that? We did a whole show on SMART goals. How are they going to measure it? What are their objectives? What I'm doing, is it moving me toward the objective? There's so many different ways you can answer this, and it depends on what type of project or assignment it is. And this is a biggie. How do I tackle multi-part questions? A lot of our kids with big picture issues get points counted off or the entire question wrong because they did not answer all parts of a question. So do you agree that the da-da-da of World War II was well advised? Why or why not? And they answer the first part and not the why or why not. That was such a bad example. But it could also be a math problem. There's multiple parts to this, and they leave off some of the parts. So it also can be big project and everything's a Roman numeral and no ABCs 1, 2, 3s. So teach kids to chunk things down into manageable bites. If your kids are getting overwhelmed, help them break it down. Use a planner. We've talked about how put in due dates, not from the school, but internally that you and your kids have come up with for when a certain portion of assignment's going to be done. That's another way that we tackle multi-part assignments. Underlining and color coding. If you look at your kids' textbooks and the whole book is highlighted, that means they don't get big picture because they don't get what the main concepts versus the details are. They don't know how to know what is a test-worthy question, probably in this teacher's opinion. Even that is a sign. If they underline and have too many things highlighted, I don't get the hierarchy here of main ideas and details. Big cue for us. Okay. So finally, a few more things to think about real quick before we wrap up here is just to talk openly with your kids. And we don't need a slide for this. This is just kind of giving you a few more quick tips about the big picture and why it matters. A lot of kids don't even know what that means. So you can even, sometimes talking in metaphors is really good. Elon Musk, and I posted this on my page yesterday, was talking about thinking about learning as a semantic tree, and make sure you know the roots and the trunk and the large branches, or else the leaves don't have anything to hang on. You know, you can even pull up quotes like that and talk about what does this mean to you, using a lot of critical thinking, but giving them a visualization. Or if they like sports, what would it be like if you could only focus on the 50-yard line? And why is it important to look downfield and know what's going on right here? You know, use what is in their life to make sense of it. For a dancer, you know, what if you only worked on your core, but not your pirouette? Yeah, just go through and talk about all the parts that are, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, but speak their language based on things they care about. I gotta say it one more time, make learning meaningful. Connect it to world events, connect it to the community, connect it to their hobbies, to things they've done in the past, to things they've read, to family culture. Connect. Tie new lessons with old ones. You can't connect enough. If there's something to connect it to, do it. Other subjects, last year, next year, goals, what Uncle Bob did, connect the dots as much as possible. Help them connect. Better yet, if they're able to, what does this remind you of? What do you already know about this topic? Teach them to do it. And we pull away the prompt so they start doing it on their own. But always make sure they see how the details and the big picture go together. Both are very valuable, but they must work as a team. Open-mindedness. If we come across as know-it-alls, then we are not teaching them open-mindedness. We got to put away assumptions. One of the things in my doctoral program, we were doing all of these kind of prep things before we started it. And it was always like talking about be open-minded and always be willing to read research and think, wow, that is counter to everything I ever thought. You're just to keep an open mind. Because if we go in with preconceived notions of what we think this research should say, it will skew it. That's really stuck with me, over the time. When they are solving a problem, and it is whether a toy broke and they're putting it back together, it is a social situation, it is a math problem. We do not want to just praise them if they get the question right. Where was their value in their way of thinking about it? And then praise that part. Now, what can we do to work on the other part? Because if they only get praised because they got the question right, we're not appreciating the reasoning that got them so much of the way there. But growth mindset, I've talked about that so many times. I've talked about innovation, not just creativity, because that also involves originality. Present situations without judgment. It's so good if you're sit around the dinner table or at your weekly family meetings and talk about a topic without sharing what you think about it. We want our kids to form their own opinions. And then if there's anything in there that scares you, y'all can talk through it, still respect it. But if we tell our opinion first, they might just align and they might just say what you said because you said it. Or if they're struggling with defiance due to, which is the challenging behavior saying I'm struggling, but they might say the opposite. Just because you said it's white, they're going to say black. So you present information, have them share their opinions before you share yours. Let's see. Think of, have them come up with alternative scenarios for cause and effect situation. Do a lot of cause and effect, same and different. And don't just reference examples of a concept, show them, create. Do a science project this summer. STEAMpoweredfamily.com has so many cool project-based learning types of ideas that are just really neat things that those things are not in my wheelhouse to come up with.
What did you say that website was again? Because me neither.
STEAM Powered Family. STEAM, like choo-choo.
Family. Yep.
Yeah. But don't just show them examples. Have them create examples. Project, hands-on, connect the dots, make it meaningful. give them opportunities to formulate opinions without you providing yours. Always talk with your kids, not at them. We could go on and on, but big picture is so much more than the main idea of a story.
I love this. I love all of it. And I think that's such a good reminder there at the end, not to kind of always be the one that thinks they're right, because they really do just mirror everything that we do.
I posted today on my page, like, isn't it, I mean, we don't get to pick what they mimic in us, and that's rotten, but it just is. If only we could pick, like, oh, this is my strength, imitate this.
Yeah.
But they don't pick and choose the things that we necessarily want them to. So there's just a lot of self-reflection on our part. And what are we modeling unintentionally? Or what are we modeling that in and of itself is okay, but that might be misperceived by them? I mean, that's something to think about too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Heather, this has been so eye-opening. I've loved learning about it, really, from my own perspective and for my children as well. As you can see there, we've got where you can follow Heather. Make sure you write that down if you're not already following her. And you've got all these brain balance centers near you, within your reach. Give them a call, get an assessment today if you have not already. They are just a wealth of knowledge, and it is Heather's mission to help as many families and as many individuals, frankly, as she possibly can. And she's helped us so much. We're so grateful. Heather, do you have anything else going on this week that you want to tell everybody about?
Thursday at 3:30, Dr. Brian and I will be talking about how do I know my child's developmental age? And if you've followed us for very long, you know that it's very likely, especially with neurodiverse kids, that the developmental age in different arenas is different, but it's going to be a really cool conversation.
All right. So make sure you guys are following along and seeing Heather there. And we will see you next week with another awesome topic. Thank you so much, Heather. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, next week we won't be on. It's Memorial Day. So it's a holiday, but we'll be back in 2 weeks. But Dr. Brian and I will be here this Thursday and next Thursday. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for that reminder. All right. So we will catch you guys in 2 weeks. Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.